when Maureen creates these, she pushes them out. So they're copies of the original. So we probably have to stop that and edit it and then send out the new updated key.
All right. I'll check in with you after, and maybe we can coordinate doing all that with Maureen.
Yep, tomorrow. Okay.
Live on YouTube. We're live on the channel. Thank you. Sorry about the delay.
That was great. Thank you, Joe.
And LaTanya.
And LaTanya. Thank you. All right. It is Wednesday, March 10th. This is the Swampscott School Committee regular session meeting. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It looks like, I see John. I think we're just waiting for Ted. Mr. Cohet, good, I see you. Okay, so why don't we get started? I am going to begin with community announcements. We did not do this last time. Ms. Marshall, why don't we start with you?
I actually don't have anything tonight. I'm excited to hear about the plans, so I'm good.
John Piantis?
Thanks, Amy. Actually, I'm thinking just like Karen is on this one, so I'll yield back as well.
Okay. Suzanne?
Ditto.
Okay.
No pressure here.
Do I see, I know Myra is going to join us late, and Tabitha, why don't you jump in? I appreciate your email earlier today. So why don't you go ahead?
Do you want me to talk about like the email or just the normal?
Well, why don't you do just sort of the normal, your normal update, and why don't you, after the superintendent makes her presentation, why don't you share?
I would actually prefer it as part of her community comment, because then I can speak to it as part of my, Tabitha, you bring up a really good point in your email, and I appreciate the advanced email, but why don't you talk about it now? Because it's nothing I haven't heard before, but I think everybody should hear it. It's
Okay.
Okay. So I've heard that the Swampscott school system is thinking about pushing the start time back from 9 a.m. to 8:10 a.m. like it used to be, and to also get rid of the half day on Wednesdays and make it a full length day. And myself and other students who have heard about that, I haven't heard one student be happy about that. And there's mostly what people have issue with is the start time being pushed back, because starting at 9 a.m. versus 8:10 a.m. is a world of a difference to a high school student. And I can attest to personally, throughout my first 3 years of high school before Corona, I would get, and this is not an exaggeration, I would get 5 to 6 hours of sleep every night, 7 at most. And not only does that hurt one as a student, they cannot academically perform well, they cannot even socially or in athletics perform well, because the teenage body needs at least 10 hours of sleep. And that just physically is not possible in any high school, I would say, in the United States, but especially not when start times are at 8:10 a.m. It took a toll on myself personally, getting 6 hours of sleep every night constantly for 3 years. I know it caused me literal physical harm, but also emotional harm, because your brain needs more sleep than that. And this is not just for me. This is many students in the high school. I would say the vast majority don't get a lot of sleep, and especially when start times are at 8:10. But now when the start time was at 9, and obviously this is because of Corona and not because of a good reason, yet the fact that we did start at 9 has helped me sleep-wise. I've been able to sleep more. My friends have been able to sleep more. And that's sort of a silver lining if you're trying to look at that situation in a positive light. So I, at least what the students feel like, that pushing back the start time is not a good idea in any way, shape, or form. I don't know logistically what exactly it's like and if it has to do with sports teams, but if it does have to do with that, looking at students' health or playing sports because school needs to end at 2:30 for that to happen, like personally, I would think that students' health rises above that, especially we look at the budget, and the school has been sending millions of dollars, in students' mental health. But a very simple way to help boost that would be allow them to get more sleep. So there's just many reasons why I think the school time should continue to start at 9 a.m. versus 8:10 a.m. And about Wednesdays being a half day versus a full day, again, I don't know exactly what's happening behind the scenes and if they just want students in the class more hours. But personally, I can attest to that students really enjoy being able to have a bit of a breather in the middle of the week, especially with being online all the time. Students need that mental break to click out of their screens. And now that the weather's getting nicer, they can use that time to either go outside or relax, take a nap, do something that isn't just being on a computer all day. And I know that the school is trying to get more students in school in person starting around after April, I believe. But there are still some students that won't be able to return for whatever reasons, health or family. And those students will then be forced to be at a computer screen for more hours in a day. So I believe that the way the system is right now, it's better for the students' health in the sense of being able to sleep more and like Wednesdays allowing them to get off their screens. Thank you.
Thanks, Tabitha. We really appreciate your student voice on this. And there are reasons for the decisions that I'll explain later. And some of them are beyond our control right now. But the points you bring up are incredibly valid with some of the work we're doing this year to figure out the future.
All right. I'm going to, somebody keeps popping up into our screen named Danielle Johnson, and I'm just curious. I don't see her at the moment, but I just want to make sure I'm not leaving anybody out. Does anybody recognize that name?
She's an 8th grade science teacher here at the middle school.
Oh, okay. My apologies.
I don't think she should be on the.
Oh, maybe she's just trying to log in as a.
I think she's just trying to get in.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry to call the name out. Okay. I am, before we go forward, I'm just going to read a quick statement that that it's been a year now. So on March 15th, 2020, Governor Baker came on TV and announced that all Massachusetts schools would be closed for the next 3 weeks. And we were at the very early days of the COVID pandemic, and none of us really ever could have dreamed what we'd be in for. And here we are a full calendar year later, still muddling through the details on how to bring our students back to full time. And it's pretty shocking to think that it's been a year. There's going to come a time when we can reflect on all that we've been through and this mountain of challenges and find those silver linings. We're trying to find them along the way. And Tabitha, to your point, we got to pay attention to what does work. But all of our energy needs to focus right now on reaching the summit of this. And we are operating now under a state mandate to bring the students back. And our leadership team, led by our superintendent, is working on the logistics to make that happen. The pandemic's been extremely difficult for everybody, especially those who've gotten sick and who've lost a loved one. And that is true here in our town as well as in other places. We continue to empathize with them and offer heartfelt best wishes to their physical and emotional recovery. In our school district, no one has been under the gun more than our superintendent. And frankly, she's been under siege for this entire year. With much of the pressure being applied by presumably well-meaning people who really want to find solutions and help with the problems that we're facing. As we share the desire to see our students and teachers back in the classroom on a full-time basis, sometimes it's easy to lose sight of the fact that by simply wanting it, however badly, it can't occur as quickly, as easily, and without the machinations that there are. The job has been left up to the superintendent and her team with a remarkable lack of state leadership. And I'd like to say unequivocally that Superintendent, you and your team have performed admirably under the most difficult circumstances imaginable. That in normal years, the way that we would transition to new styles of learning would take years to plan and not a few months. So the fact that you and your team came up with not one new learning plan, not two, but 3 consecutive, or congruent learning plans, I think is really unbelievable. And I know that none of the 3 were fabulous. None of the three met what you set out to do in terms of being as seamless and as easy as could be. But it was not for lack of trying and creative thinking. So as we see the light at the end of the COVID tunnel, it's more important ever that we allow the superintendent and her whole team who are charged with running this district the opportunity to do their jobs and without interruption. The committee and the superintendent will always be respectful of your ability, our audience's ability to ask questions and to offer input. But we're at that point now where I'm going to ask people to think about who they're communicating with and how, and perhaps not escalating each issue that might arise, that you go to your building, you start with your teacher, you go to your building leader, that there are lots of people in the process before you get to the superintendent and contact her, because what the school committee has tasked her, she's not able to answer all that comes in. So please, in that vein, don't correlate a lack of an immediate response to an email or a phone call with being ignored. At this point, all the logistics are being discussed, and our district leadership, which not only includes our superintendent, who's been in district for 25, 30 years, 31 years, sorry, I should know that. But you know, her executive team, who has years and years of the kind of experience that we value and that we pay you for. So I want to say that, you know, it's hard not to, for all of us, the school committee included, to put our 2 cents in, but I really want to make sure that we allow the superintendent and her team now to really focus on what they need to do. And we need to give you the time and space to make that happen. So I didn't, to sum it up, Superintendent, I wanted to acknowledge you and your entire team. And it's nice to see the faces of so many of that executive team in front of us, because I know that these are the decision makers. And we know that there has been a lot that has gone wrong over the last year, but I think more importantly, there's a lot that is going well. So thank you for just trying to do your best in these crummy circumstances.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And I do see a lot of attendees, and I want to address something. As much as I might not be able to respond to everything, I do hear everything. And one of the things, Madam Chair, you and I talked about is the fact that as a district leadership team, we have many administrative assistants that assist us. And oftentimes we will task an administrative assistant to send a district-wide email to families. And I am hearing that when families don't recognize the name, because there are so many administrative assistants, that they're not sure if it's spam, if it's junk mail, if it's authentic. And so some people are missing emails because they're dismissing them, not knowing the name. So I haven't even asked Ms. Mackey-Knowles yet, but what we were talking about is creating one email address that is from the administration of SPS, so that if we do task an administrative assistant with sending out a letter, such as Dr. Bacon did with her administrative assistant, Donna McHugh, it comes from one email address so that families would be able to easily recognize it. And within that email, you'll see who the signature is from. But oftentimes we're on the fly and we just ask our administrative assistants to send something out. But I do recognize the last survey that went out, people didn't know who it was from because it was from somebody in my office, Christine James, and they never heard that name, so they didn't open it. So moving forward, we will be trying to improve that. And when we task our administrative assistants with sending an email, we'll try to send it from that email address so families recognize it. May I go into my superintendent's report?
Yes, please. This is what everybody's waiting for.
All right. I'm really, really, really excited. Suzanne, I guess I can pull it up. Never mind, I can share my screen. I won't be looking at the camera, which doesn't matter, but my 2 screens here. So first I want to say that last school committee meeting and the directive from the commissioner were really excited and really did what we needed to do in terms of moving forward for our district. And I do think it's really important to give some shout outs and thank yous tonight. You parents know who you are, but I do want to thank the parent group who organized themselves to help make vaccination appointments for our faculty and staff. They modeled it after another district, came forward, we shared it with the district. I have no idea how many staff or faculty are making use of it, but the volunteerism to sit and try to make appointments for our staff, I'm really, really grateful for. You know, we have made a website of the vaccination sites, a web page created by Ms. Mackie Knowles in terms of tips and tricks to get into certain sites for vaccination, but every little bit definitely helps. I'll also shout out to our nurses across the district who are working. Walgreens reached out to Emily Silly, our lead nurse, and working with Amanda Mulcahy. They are working on doing an on-site vaccination. We don't have a definitive time or date yet, but we have been in communication with Walgreens, and if we could get some kind of on-site vaccination plan or clinic going, that would be a tremendous help as well. And then a big thank you to the 24 parents and community members, that was the number this afternoon when I last looked, who've already signed up to volunteer where we need you to be as we roll out more in-person learning. I do want to be clear that I don't know what the plans are for you right now. My team and I felt it was important to get ahead of this and figure out how many people were available. We are still figuring out lunches. We are still figuring out ventilation, which you will hear about tonight. But in the meantime, to have a pool of volunteers who are willing to give up their time and days to help us is really going to help us as we move forward over the next few weeks. And I will be getting to a timeline of our rollout further down in my report. But one of the things, we have a lot of pieces moving. We have the teacher vaccination. We have setting up the rooms and emptying the storage containers. We have an LBA report that shows purple classrooms that we have mitigated their use. We have the Stanley ventilation project going on and little Stanley students still up at the high school. So all of those things I will address later in my report, but I first would like to turn it over to Max Casper, our Director of Facilities, to give you an update on the ventilation report and the project going on over at Stanley. So Mr. Casper, I will control your, oops, it's a PDF. Is it a PDF? I think it is. Can you see this or do you need to, let's do this. And present. Okay,
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, nice to see everyone again. We're going to give a brief update on some of the ventilation items that have been going on and where we stand with them. We've been talking about ventilation from a really early stage in this process, and it continues to be an important factor. So I'm not going to go through the entire timeline like I have before, because it's getting so lengthy, all the different steps that we have. But I think pretty much everyone is well aware of our, we had an initial assessment followed by a comprehensive survey project of all the ventilation equipment in our older buildings, and so that was followed by reissuing of floor plans, and the whole time we've kind of been trying to assess the status of the ventilation in our buildings so that we can make the best decisions for how we're using the spaces and how we can use them safely. So that really continues to be the case as we move into the next phase of the reopening. So I wanted to kind of update you all as to where we stand. So following the last sort of round of reporting, there was a issuance of floor plans that gave a pretty simple color coding of most of the spaces at the 4 older buildings, excluding the high school. And most of the spaces were designated with a green color, indicating that they were safe to use and due to the level of the mechanical ventilation in the space. In following that round of reporting, we continue to do a lot of work, and that's what I think it's really important to recognize, is that wasn't the end of this process. Following that round of reporting, we continue to do considerable work to the unit ventilators in the classrooms, to the air handlers that are serving different spaces, and to the exhaust side systems in the school buildings. In addition, following that survey project, there was a number of ATC stands for automatic temperature controls. That's the control side of the ventilation systems. And there was a tremendous amount of repairs that we did to the different equipment to get it to operate properly from a controls perspective. And that's really critical from ventilation, because the controls dictate the amount of outside air that is coming in, and you really need to have that working to have ventilation working properly. And in addition to all that repair work, we've also been ramping up through about 5 different phases now the level of air purifiers that we have in the buildings. And at this point in time, we actually have an air purifier on site in every single classroom, available to every single classroom in all of the 4 older buildings. So everything except for the high school, every single classroom has access to an air purifier at this point. And there's actually more coming for some of our other smaller spaces that we'll talk more about as we move along here. So what I wanted to stress is that the hope and the expectation is that the additional repairs that we've been doing since the last round of reporting has continued to improve the performance of our ventilation equipment in all of our buildings. Next slide, please. And so I lead in like this because a really important piece as we make this next round of decisions and on how we're phasing in is what we all have come to know as these purple rooms. And these are rooms that were designated in the last round of reporting as purple because they underperformed from a ventilation perspective. We never shut these rooms down and didn't use them. We just used them more carefully. We gave more pointed direction as to window use. These were the rooms that received air purifiers immediately, were prioritized for air purifiers. So I wanted to make sure I made that point that these rooms were never closed. They were just mitigated as a priority and used more carefully. And that was all in consultation with the mechanical engineer. So as we move towards more people in the building, of course, it's an important consideration whether we can increase the numbers of students and people in these purple spaces. So we've been really discussing the best approach to these spaces, because there are about 13, depending on how you classify them, 13 to 15-ish rooms in the district, and that's a substantial number. So what we decided to do is go back to all of these rooms after all the work that has been occurring over the last few months and do another round of testing. So part of the survey project was a testing and balancing segment where there was a specialized contractor that measured the ventilation performance in the spaces. And there's some really important data. Now that data is just a piece of the puzzle, a piece of our analysis and the decisions we made, but it's important, and it really helps us understand what's going on from a mechanical ventilation perspective. So this week, we actually have started another round of this tab work, and they're going into all of these purple spaces in the 4 buildings and getting another round of data points so that we can see where we are at there. And our hope is that the data will show that most of these purple spaces are now performing comparable to the other spaces in the district, but more importantly, it's going to tell us the reality of where we stand with them. And if they are not performing better than they were before, we need to deal with that and adjust our plans accordingly. And again, like I said, hopefully they are performing better. And I really am cautiously optimistic that many of these spaces are going to come into the green category essentially and can be used in the next phase, similar to the other classrooms in the district. But the bottom line is that we're going to have a tremendous amount of more information on these spaces to make the right decision. Next slide, please. And the next thing I wanted to talk about was to give the board a quick update on the Stanley HVAC project. So closely linked to everything else I've been talking about. In the analysis that we've done previously, as everyone knows, the old building at Stanley was designated as the most problematic area from a ventilation perspective in the district, and it's been closed for the majority of the school year. So there is a ongoing project to install a entirely new exhaust system. You can see some pictures there on the slide of that is new ductwork that has been installed within the last month in the Stanley attic in the Stanley building. This project is still ongoing. It's going well. The scope of the project is predominantly this installation of a new exhaust side system. And in a conjunction with that, there is also some selective repairs to the existing supply side ventilation, which is what mostly is univents. And we talk about univents a lot. So there's some old univent equipment in the Stanley space that also needed repairs here and there, different types of repairs in the different classrooms. But the brunt of the project is this, and the real capital investment was this new exhaust side system. So this major component, the exhaust ductwork and new mechanical fans, is nearing completion, and the other pieces are rounding into form as well. So we're still in the middle of a construction project, so it's not 100% at this point, but we really are on track for the majority of these spaces in the old building to be available for occupancy by the end of March, which is really exciting. Again, in the middle of a construction project, so it's not 100% at this point, but really good news on that front, and it's coming at a really good time, as it really lines up closely with this next phase of the reopening and the need for additional spaces to put students. So really good news on that front. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I've set up a number of bullet points here, recommendations from the facilities department, taking into consideration everything that I've been talking about, and basically where we are at this point in time from a public health perspective, with relative lower number of COVID cases and increasing levels of vaccinations. You need to keep in mind that the directives that we've given from a facilities perspective have all been closely tied with these public health items, and the decisions we made in the upward swing of the pandemic, we're keeping that closely in mind. And now that it appears that things are getting better, our decisions need to be relative to that fact. So based on that, we're making some modified recommendations. And one of them is that small spaces previously designated exclusively as office spaces and not for any in-person learning may now be utilized for small group interactions between students and staff, as long as there is an operable window in the space and a purifier is in the space. So this is opening up a number of these smaller spaces in the older buildings that were basically only being used by single occupancy staff previously. And as long as those spaces now have a window and have a purifier, we're going to allow small group interactions in those spaces. And that's really quite valuable with the way that today's education happens, and all the breakouts and all the specialized services. So that's really a vital component. The next recommendation is that purple rooms that do not show improvement in the ongoing retesting should remain at 6 feet social distancing. So as of today, purple rooms were at 6 feet social distancing with all the other recommendations in those spaces. And if we don't see significant improvement in the mechanical ventilation, which again, we are hoping to, we are going to recommend that those spaces stay where they are. But again, hopefully that won't be the case in the large majority of the 6 feet social distancing. And then in the spaces that are going to be occupied at 3 feet social distancing, we again just want to stress that the multi-pronged approach of mechanical ventilation, natural ventilation, and air purification should continue to be practiced and stressed in all of those spaces. And then there's a layer of complexity to it, and it applies to our larger spaces and the occupancies in those spaces. So the directive at this time is that these spaces may the occupancy in these spaces may safely be increased from the set numbers that we're currently at. And we will work through these occupancies on a case-by-case basis. There's a lot of different things going on in the different spaces, from the Hadley Gymnasium to the middle school spaces, and they really can't just be lumped together and say that we're going to approach them in one set way. And there's a small enough number of these that we can look at all the information we have, the physical aspects of those spaces, how much windows are actually there that have the ability to open, what's the mechanical ventilation numbers in those spaces. And we're gonna look at each of those and make the right decision as to what is a safe occupancy for those spaces. And then one final note that I wanted to make was that I just wanted to make it very clear that the high school is, again, a very different animal than the rest of the buildings in the district. And we can treat it quite differently. It's a much newer building. And window usage and purification there are not as vital. They are advisable at certain times and in certain spaces, but they don't need to be as widespread or mandatory. We've talked a lot about the things that we did at the high school that we had the ability to do that we don't in the other spaces with the modern controls and the modern ventilation equipment. So just wanted to make that clear again, because sometimes we talk so much about the spaces in the older buildings, and that gets conflated into the high school, and it needs to be differentiated. So I just wanted to make that final point.
So I just want to emphasize one point that Max has talked about, because it can't be overemphasized. And I've shared this with all of the teachers, and I've shared this actually with the entire district, that we're still not using small spaces that do not have windows. It's very important that people understand that. Anyway, and then I guess Max will take questions from the committee.
Committee, anybody?
It was great and very helpful. I didn't realize so much had been done. So no, that's great.
Yeah, I know I don't have any questions. It was very thorough and answered what I've been asking the superintendent about. So thank you.
Yeah, same here. I feel like we're getting ahead of this, which is great. But I hopefully, obviously there'll be all sorts of corrections as we really start to use the spaces, but this is awesome.
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that each one of the things that we're talking about, in particular, these purple rooms and this report we're supposed to get at the end of the week, is really going to drive the decisions that have to be made at each building. When you think about 15 spaces among 4 schools, and then the Stanley ventilation project, there's a reason that we're approaching this in a very phased in manner, because depending on what the outcome of those purple rooms are, that's going to give the building leaders abilities to shift things around. So, even though we said it can't be done like a light switch, we have a lot of reasons in these buildings and the safety of our students and staff, and looking at these purple rooms and seeing what comes back, and then giving us time to make adjustments at the building level. So everything, I kind of was talking to the leadership today, the team today, and talking about how we have a domino effect. When does little Stanley move back to Stanley School? When do we find out about the purple rooms? Everything is happening and kind of lining up right now, but I don't want to jinx ourselves. But I think it's important to note that it's a good time of year. We've got good weather coming, warmer days ahead. And so we're really excited. Before I get into the rest of my presentation, I do want Mrs. Mulcahy, our occupational health nurse, to talk about the Buy Next Now testing that we're implementing within the district. Last I heard, there were 171 districts across the Commonwealth that were participating in the pool testing that DESE is offering. The original date for that was March 28th, but they've extended it to pay through April 18th for that. But as a district and a leadership team, we decided that wasn't for us. Not so much the cost. If you recall, it was reported that some districts would end up paying $20,000 to $30,000 a week after the initial coverage of DESE's paying for this service. But more than that, it is about how thinly stretched our nursing staff already is. And so we made the decision as a team that Buy Next Now testing, point of contact testing, was best for our district. It is free of cost through the remainder of the year. And Mrs. Mulcahy is going to explain that more to all of you.
Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity for letting me explain this. So yeah, this is a great opportunity that DESE is providing. Binex Now is an antigen card. It's an anterior gentle nasal swab that we basically put in an agent, and it will test if someone is actively with COVID in the schools. So people who can have this test is anybody symptomatic in our buildings. They can come down to the nurses station, get assessed, and be tested as long as that they have both authorizations forms filled out. Project Beacon will be the platform that will actually be our results will go into. It's a third party that DESE, a third party vendor that DESE and the Department of Public Health has contracted to submit all of our results into, and then they'll report it to the state. So if it is positive, then it will go into CTC that way. I just wanted to go in a little bit more and just talk about how, what this test isn't, because I think that's important. This isn't an excuse to send children into school sick or faculty to come in sick just because we're testing. Please don't do that. It increases the risk of transmission. It is not a determination on whether or not someone could stay in the building. If they're sick, they need to leave and follow the protocols as is, which is being out the 10 days. And it's also really important that if you are tested in the school, that you understand that this is not a clinical decision-making. It is just being used as a tool to help us process and to start the contact tracing efforts quicker, and there's no delay. And then by doing that, that's decreasing the risk of in-school spread and ultimately keeping everybody safe. So if you are tested, you will have to follow up with a provider and get alternative testing, which is like a PCR test to follow up with. I just wanted to also talk about how Project Beacon, so there'll be two authorizations. You'll have to sign up with Project Beacon, and I will be sending out a letter with all the instructions later this week. And then once you do that, you'll get notified that you're linked to our school's actual testing program, and anyone tested will receive an email saying that they have been tested. The other authorization is for the school purposes to say that you authorize for the school to test you. So once those are up you will be all set to be tested. If you are symptomatic, hopefully individuals will still not be coming into the building sick, but if you do develop symptoms, this is a great mitigation tool that we can quickly test you and see if you're positive and then start the contact tracing. Is there any questions? I know I kind of went through that real quick. I apologize.
Ms. Mulcahy, can you tell me what's the turnaround time on something like this?
So we will get the results in 16 minutes.
Whoa.
So
Okay.
yeah, it's a quick little, after you nasal swab, we put a couple drops of the reactant agent onto a card, and then 16 minutes later, we can see the results.
And why the need to then go and get a PCR test?
So that's something that Dr. D'Souza and I talked about. And because that we're not making this test is not a clinical decision, it's just an added layer of mitigation that she really feels it's necessary for you to follow up with a primary care. Also too, we do know that there are limitations to antigen testing. So the accuracy really depends on the symptom onset. So as you go out through your first day, the accuracy can kind of decrease on the antigen testing, and that's why it's also important to follow up. So although you might be negative in our school, you could still produce a positive PCR test. So it's really important to follow through.
So if my child goes to school and she is coughing and has a runny nose, and she takes this test and it says that she's negative, what are next steps? And I know that I know you don't have all your protocols together yet, but.
So actually, yeah. So as the way we have it set up, it is not a determination of whether or not you can stay into school. So if you are sick enough to go down to the nurse and get tested, you're probably sick enough that you need to go home and follow the protocols. which is consistent of the 10 days being out until you're symptom free. And if a provider can give us an alternative diagnosis, then you can come back with a negative PCR test. So all of our policies and procedures regarding to that aspect is the same. We're not changing anything, but you know, if you are negative and you're symptomatic, we're still going to send you home on that risk. So.
And when
It's also important to note that everything is completed. The protocols, the letters ready to go out. In fact, the supplies have come in and the nurses have completed training on how to administer this. Am I right with that, Mrs. Mulcahy?
Yep. So today we had our final training. So all of our nursing staff has been officially passed off on the ABEX Now training, and we will be able to administer the test as of the 22nd. As long as both authorization forms are completed and filed, that's one through Project Beacon and one for the school to test. If your child or if a faculty member is not feeling well, they can come down to the nurse's office and get tested before they go home.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mrs. Mulcahy.
Welcome.
Okay, so I see that she has turned off her video, but to speak to Tabitha's points earlier, there's a couple of things I want to talk about. There you are. I hear everything you're saying. As the mother of an 18-year-old, I know how much sleep you all need. I recognize that. But why we're moving the way we're moving is because the state is directing us to do so. So for the remainder of this year, we're not going to be able to make that change for a later start for the high school. But what I want to tell you and what I want to tell any and all high school students who are listening or watching, we are in the middle of that middle school and high school scheduling study. And whatever the results of that study are going to determine our plans moving forward for scheduling. So whether we make an adjustment to our start time for our high school kids, that could very much be coming in our future. We do have a lot of discussions to talk about, but we're in the midst, we had our second meeting today. We have a meeting next week and a meeting the following week. And this group is made up of high school teachers, middle school teachers, administration, and they're going to be sharing with us some best practice. And then we're going to formulate our schedule moving forward. And so that would be part of a discussion moving forward, definitely. But unfortunately, the state is directing us to get back to our time on learning requirements, which mean flipping back to our old schedule. So I know it's not the answer you want to hear, but that's the reason that we're doing this for the remainder of the year. So a couple of things. Tents, we've had a lot of discussions about tents. And Mr. Casper and I decided to roll the dice and hope for no April Fool's Day snowstorm. So we're having them reinstalled the week of March 29th. One of the changes to the tents this time in the spring, and because of all of the changes in the regulations, we've investigated the fact that we can use the sides of the tents now. We do have to keep them rolled up to some degree, but in terms of ventilation, but we are having the sides of the tents installed as well so that we can utilize these spaces in inclement weather. We know they're not the end all be all and solution to all the problems that we might face, but having those sides of the tents are going to be beneficial during any kind of rainy day. I also want to talk about some purchases and how we chose to use our ESSER funds. We are looking at, well, we have ordered portable seating. There are these plastic seats and desks, one-piece units that we feel like at the elementary level and maybe at the younger middle school levels can be used both indoor and outdoor. So if we start to do outdoor lunches, they can sit on these little units and have their lunch, and they have a little table and they have a little seat. So we have ordered a set of these, about 50 for each of the elementary schools and 50 for the middle school, and we'll be testing those out. We have gone, the principals with their custodians have gone through the classrooms at the elementary level that were using tables, and we are doing away with the tables, which means we need to order more desks because we feel like the 3-foot distancing with the desks is the best model to follow. We have also purchased individual desk shields for all of the elementary students. They would go on their desks in addition to perhaps some at the middle school. But everyone will have a sneeze guard or shield, a little portable cubby. They'll be clear versus the testing cardboard you used to have around. So we have also ordered those. And then finally, Mr. Cohut ordered some really nice picnic tables that are ADA compliant for outside at the high school last year, and to encourage kids pre-pandemic and teachers to go out and eat. We're also ordering some of those for each of the schools. How many at each school will be dependent on the space availability at their school. And we know during, these times, adults would probably only a picnic table would fit 2, but we are looking at how to utilize outdoor spaces the best. And we are purchasing, I think, smart items that will have multiple uses throughout the district. Next on my superintendent's report, did I stop sharing my screen so you're not looking at this? Let me do it again. Classroom setup. So ever since the last meeting, school committee meeting we had, custodians have been working under their principal's guidance to set up the classrooms and start removing the desks from the storage containers that are at each school. And what we're asking teachers to do, and we've already sent this out, is to start to think about any extraneous furniture they might have in their classrooms that might be able to be shifted back into the containers for more desks in their classroom. So the teachers will be working closely with their principals, who will be working closely with their custodians. I have approved overtime for the custodians this weekend to get a lot of this work done. And they've already started. And today being a remote day, I'm sure they were able to accomplish a lot, but they still need more time to do so. One of the topics I wanted to make clear to the committee, and also make clear to anybody in the community watching, is that just as we said about the learning models, staffing situations are not going to flip over like a light switch. We have a list of staff, and our HR director is out. And I would like to know how many we have, but I have heard a lot about the high school students not wanting to be in school when their own teacher's not in school. What I need to impress upon the committee and the public is that these are legitimate medical accommodations. And so to say to the group of teachers that are out for medical reasons, you need to show up on this date, is really not fair. And their doctors are coming back and saying, they can't come back until they're fully vaccinated. So what we're doing is a rolling return, whereby if once the teacher or the staff member is fully vaccinated, which would be with Moderna and Pfizer, the 2-shot dosage, and then now CDC is saying 2 weeks after that second shot, you're fully vaccinated, the staff members will be returning. So we are keeping a list of dates of vaccination so that we will be making a plan for reentry for all of these staff members, but it's not holding up our timeline for return. But I do think it's important to say this is their right, this is the law, and this is what we're following. So it's not like the timeline I'm going to share with you means that every teacher will be back in. And I think it's important for the community to understand the rights and the laws that we have to follow.
Superintendent, I know that there were some teachers who also made use of leave to satisfy problems with childcare issues. What's the status of that? Or
that's not available anymore.
Okay.
And so those would be,
are they back?
Well, that would be handled on a case-by-case basis through HR. And so that childcare relief, the FFCRA is not available anymore. And so I'm really letting Ricardo, our HR director, handle that. But this is more about medical accommodations. And I just think it's important for people to know they have a right. This is their right, and they're under doctor's care, and we're trying to be reasonable, and they're dying to get back as much as everyone else. So I know in addition to the parent group that is securing vaccination appointments for our staff, there's also a group of staff that are securing vaccination appointments for our staff. So there's a lot of avenues that people are pursuing to get appointments. So yesterday, the commissioner came out with return dates. He stayed consistent with his April 5th date, that K to 5, unless you're a middle school that has a 5 to 8, then you can apply for a waiver, because he said on a call today, it doesn't make sense for you to bring in one grade level at a middle school model. So if you are a K to 4 at the elementary schools, bringing in K to 4 is appropriate on April 5th, and that's what we will be doing. He has slated April 28th for the middle school return, and it was TBD for the high school return, as Tabitha referred to earlier. So let's get to the meat of it, our timeline. Those are the
Before you do, Ms. Angelakis, I see that Tabitha has her hand up.
Tabitha.
Oh, I was just gonna say, to the point of, I think you said how students get frustrated that they have to be in class if their teacher isn't. I don't think that that means the students want the teacher to be there, but rather, I don't know exactly, because I've never been a hybrid student, but that the students have to be in the classroom or in the school and join the Zoom from there, that they're not allowed to go home and join the Zoom from home if the teacher is also home. And I think that's where the frustration from the students comes, not from demanding that the teachers be in school physically, but instead from that they're not allowed to leave the building, even if they don't have a teacher physically in the classroom.
I completely understand. It was Zooming from the high school that was frustrating for the kids. Thank you. So our timeline. So I've given you what the commissioner has set out as guidance, and there was lots of guidance that came out today. And I will be reviewing it with my team over the next couple of days, because we were all in meetings all day long. I want to emphasize that this is an overview and an outline of our district plan. Any further details in the nitty-gritty or the in the weeds business, those communications are going to come from your building principal, because as we've talked about frequently, every school has different nuances. Every school and their facilities are in different situations. But what I do want to emphasize is that the entire team, principals, assistant principals, central office staff, facilities director, maintenance and operations director, everybody has been part of this plan. So this isn't a superintendent plan that I'm rolling out. Everyone has been part of this. This is an overview, but as we talked about in the hours and hours and hours and hours that we've met, the details and communications will now start coming from your building principals. As we've done in the last year, it's not always been popular, but we've been very purposeful and cautious in our approach, and we're doing the same thing now. I would love nothing more than to say, Monday, everybody come in full day. We do not have the spaces worked out yet. We do not have the large spaces. We do not have the lunches figured out yet, because according to the commissioner's guidance, it's still at 6 feet. Well, we don't know if our large spaces are even going to be opened yet. Certainly we'll do lunch outside as much as we can at every building, but we're still figuring those things out. So beginning March 22nd.
Superintendent, before you jump into it, is there any way to make it your screen bigger? It's hard to read.
Oh, sorry, it's so big here. I forget that sometimes. Wait a minute, I do know.
Because I can see like all of it around your screen. I know it doesn't present the same way that a PowerPoint does.
That's not any better?
That's better, but if you could just make the font maybe, or, go up to like 150%.
Oh, that'll be fun. It's gonna throw the whole thing off. Let's do 96.
Well, no, but
No,
like,
not your font.
like not your font, but in your view. Sorry.
See the little percentage at the top, Pam? You were hovering over it. It's a little bit over to the left near text. Yeah, click down by the 100.
Oh, yes. I gotcha.
Ah, fabulous. Thank you.
Better? Thank you. For a minute, I couldn't remember what application I was in and what program and where to go. Okay, so March 22nd. By no later, because this has occurred in some buildings already, by no later than Monday the 22nd, all special education students at elementary schools will go back to their original classrooms. So some special education students are now working out of large spaces like the cafeteria and library. They're going right back to their classrooms, and as all their homeroom classrooms. And as I've said, this has already occurred at some schools. In the meantime, we're continuing to prepare the spaces to go from 6 feet to 3 feet, moving furniture, waiting on the Purple Room classroom report. And on the week of the 22nd, this is where, Tabitha, you're not going to be happy, neither is Myra. The half day at the high school is going away. It is going to be a full day of remote for the week of March 22nd. And they're going back to their 5-day schedule. So that's when the hours will change. And that is when the half day remote is going away. So savor your next week. And I will let Mr. Kohut send out the details of that. So high school is happening very quickly. The commissioner can say it's to be determined. Swampscott Public Schools is saying our high school kids are just as important as our elementary kids. March 29th, and I want to emphasize, this is for our current hybrid students, because students that chose to be remote in a previous survey chose to be remote until after April vacation. So again, when I talk about a phased in approach, we are phasing this in with our current hybrid students of cohort A and B, and they will be combined. So beginning March 29th.
So if I can jump in really quickly, the survey that the school committee sent out 2 weeks ago has nothing to do with these plans. That was a temperature taking mission. So this is only the survey that came through your office or Ms. Bacon's office.
Right. Dr. Bacon is handling the surveys. Those are the survey, that's the survey data we're going by.
Okay.
So on Monday, the 29th, our preschool will be in 8:30 to 2 o'clock, and we'll be bringing in more students. KN1 will go to a 5-day half-day model, 8 to 12:15, and the teachers will be available to Zoom with remote students at 1:15. Our middle school, all grades, 5 through 8, will go 8 to 12:30 for 5 days. And our high school, 9 through 12, will begin full days for 5 days. No lunch service at the high school. The kids will go outside or socially distant within the building. So we're moving quite much faster than the state is recommending. And we're doing what we're able to do at all grade levels, K to 12, pre-K to 12, not just looking at our elementary. The reason we're starting with the 5 days in the KN1 is because we're still figuring out lunches, and a week is not enough time to set that up. So we figured get those little ones in, get them acclimated to the 5-day schedule, keep them till 12:15. It still counts for a full day, and we'll be phasing in their reunification with their schools, I guess.
So I'm seeing K through 1 and then middle school, but what about 2 through 4?
2 through 4 is going to remain in their hybrid model until April 5th. And on April 5th, kindergarten through grade 4 will go 5 full days with lunch. So 2nd, 3rd, and 4th grades are going to have to come in and assimilate much quicker than our littlest students. We are planning on food services. Ms. Seibert was working with our food services director, Maureen Kellett, and we're talking about one lunch choice. So there really isn't a choice. And we're talking about a boxed or bagged lunch only. So they won't be trays. They won't be having a lot of food. It will be a pickup kind of lunch or a drop-off kind of lunch. And so we'll also have that safety mitigation. So by April 5th, everybody is going to be in. Middle school will remain at half days until the goal of the middle school is that on April 12th, not waiting till the 28th, dependent on the information that comes from the new report on the purple spaces, 5 through 8 would go 5 full days with lunches. Other considerations and work to be done. A lot of concern for our remote students. We're not dismissing them. However, it's really important to emphasize that the state feels it's safe enough to bring students back in at 3-foot distancing for in-person learning. Families can choose to keep their kids remote for the remainder of the year, but that time on learning isn't a factor for this group of students. So whatever we do for our remote students isn't going to meet the standards of the in-person learning, because the focus is really going to shift to the in-person learning. We are tossing around ideas and still to be work to be done. We are still advertising for remote teachers for our remote learners, but the plan as of now, because believe it or not, another survey has to go out according to the commissioner, 5 through 8 and 9 through 12 will continue live Zooming or live streaming from their classrooms. And then elementary, we were thinking grades 3 and 4, we're going to attempt live Zooming. Grades K to 2 will be a combination of Zooming and asynchronous learning. And it's really important, and I want to emphasize this to the community, that the focus is shifting. The Department of Education has never required us to teach more than one model. So now that we're shifting to in-person learning, even with the live Zooming that these kids are going to be doing, and the teachers will do their best to engage these students, the focus is going to be on the children in front of them. And then the current remote students that might wish to change to in-person will be given that opportunity after April vacation, because that was the commitment that was made previously. Little Stanley, the move back to Big Stanley, as Mr. Casper spoke earlier, no decision's been made on a specific date yet. If the timing holds for the completion of the ventilation project, it would be our goal to get our students from Little Stanley back to Big Stanley, either the last week in March or the first week in April. And those communications will be ongoing from Mrs. Huntley to all of you to communicate once we figure out where we're at with this project. There also is another open family meeting for those of you that would like to give feedback tomorrow night. There is no feedback, unfortunately, tonight, although you're always welcome to email questions. At 6:30 tomorrow evening, there was a letter that went home that is linked here. And within that letter is the Zoom link for that meeting at 6:30. It's right here. And then yet another survey. And I was just referring to that the commissioner is requiring one more survey to families. We are looking forward in this survey, we're looking for information for the remainder of the year, because it's really going to impact how we figure out lunches and lunch spaces for our students depending on these numbers. So it's really important that you give us that information. I believe Dr. Bacon, and you can chime in, that survey is going out later this week, as well as the Buy Next Now testing. So there's going to be an onslaught of emails, maybe 3 from different departments with information for families. I guess I will take committee questions.
Superintendent, I think I know the answer to this, but just to be clear, in the high school, since the high school is going to start to get back to normal, but there are still a lot of kids who have opted out for a number of different reasons, whether it's health or not wanting to Zoom from a library or sports, whatever the reason may be. Between the end of March, when they go back, when we're going back to the 5-day, until after spring break, will teachers continue to live stream the classes?
Mr. Kohut?
Yes, so the plan is for the in-person students, the teacher will be working with those kids, obviously. And then for any kids who are remote, they'll be live streaming into class.
Okay.
When we make the shift at some point in April, that will be the model, but it'll be a little bit different because presumably we'll have more kids in the building. Right now we have, I think it's 297 total hybrid students who we expect to be in the building March 29th. And then whenever that date arrives in April, where we open the building to more students, it will have that same sort of live streaming capability.
And Mr. Kalishman, is that the same in middle school?
We're just going to keep doing what we've been doing. So the hybrid kids at home have been live Zooming in, the remote kids at home have been live Zooming in. We're just going to keep that. Again, like Ms. Angelakis said, though, the focus is going to have to be on the kids in front. When you have a class of 20 now, the teachers are going to have to focus a little bit more on the kids in front of them versus the kids on the screen, but they're still going to have access to the curriculum, and then they'll still have the the ability to check in with their teachers later in the day.
So I think, yeah, I think people need to be clear that, you know, this is not a survey in the sense of giving feedback. Like, you're making a selection, right? You're choosing one or the other, and then they have to have a clear understanding that after that April vacation, if they pick remote, it's not going to be necessarily what it was, and that they have to make a hard choice if it's going to be remote. And it really, I mean, should be based on medical reasons at this point and not other reasons. That's it.
I'm sorry, I just see that as putting so many students at a disadvantage. If you or your family member, if you live with parents or grandparents, it's physically unsafe. Yes, Corona's thankfully starting to get better and there are more vaccines slowly becoming available, but we are still not fully vaccinated. Most adults aren't vaccinated right now. So to have students who live with those adults who are more susceptible to getting sick and more susceptible to dying from Corona, it's basically saying if you continue to remain remote, your education will be lesser. And of course, there are tough realities in life, and the education system isn't excluded from that. But to force students to choose better education or, you know, my family's lives at some point or health, like, that's a very not great position. And I understand that the state is mandating certain things and things have to change to go back to what they used to be like, to the normal. But I don't understand why this route exactly was taken. It really does put a large number of students to make a difficult decision between remaining remote and then, because of that, receiving a lesser education.
Ms. Raymond, I see your hand raised.
I just wanted to point out that it's not just about education why the state's making that decision. There's been a real uptick in the amount of hospitalizations that have occurred for student mental health as young as elementary. We have seen that happening here in Swampscott as well. So actually they're looking at from an aggregate perspective of data and not looking only at the COVID risk, which is absolutely there, but they are also looking at the extreme risk that has now occurred to our children, not only based on academics, but based on the mental health challenges that they are facing. And our families are connecting with us about that as well. The student they are seeing in front of them now is not the student that they used to see prior to the pandemic. And so that's why this is happening. And I know each individual family is really going to have to make that choice, but that's why this is happening. It's not just missing learning opportunities. It's actually that there's significant mental health risk that has happened by not having our kids in school.
You know, just a reminder to this group that our district purchased web filters. We have Beacon, and we have GoGuardian, and we have Lightspeed. And those are being monitored 24 hours a day for any kind of student threat. And so when Mrs. Raymond talks about the increase in mental health situations with students in our district, we have the data. And so it is about, you know, family choice. It doesn't mean it's going to be a lesser education. They're still going to have the opportunity to stay on pace with their classmates through the Zoom. It just won't be in person. They're not going to get a lesser education. They'll get the same education in a different platform. And the focus of the teacher has to be on the majority of the students in front of them. Mrs. O'Connor, you've got committee members.
I saw Mr. Giantis with his hand raised, and then after Suzanne.
Thank you, Amy. And I just wanted to thank the superintendent for her thorough presentation. I actually had a bunch of questions, which I've crossed most of them off, and I just have a few left if the superintendent doesn't mind. I'm making an assumption, but I'm guessing all the students are still gonna have to wear masks on the school property and on buses, all that.
That's a great question. None of our protocols have changed. In fact, our cleaning protocols, our social distancing protocols, our mask wearing protocols, our arrows in the hallway, all of that remains the same, but that's a really good question.
Well, not the spacing.
Except for the spacing,
Yeah.
everything else, you know, the thorough cleaning, the misting, we're going to, under Mrs. Mulcahy's guidance, we're going to start a really strong hand washing campaign, particularly with our little ones, to make sure that Hand washing occurs more frequently. So we're amping it up, but I think it's important for the community to know, and I know that Mrs. Mulcahy and Mrs. Raymond were at a meeting prior to this, that we are doing our best to keep everybody safe here. And I think we've done a really good job because we've been so cautious. Kids that are in are utilizing the arrows, the entrance and exits. The middle school, I hear the announcement when some people can go out one door and the other people can go out another door, and there's just distancing there. So that was a long way to say our safety protocols are still in place.
Okay, and thank you. And sort of related, I know early on, Mr. Kalishman had his students kind of wiping down their desks after the class was over for the next class. And I don't know if that's still going on or if that's been rolled out at the high school as well. I just was curious if that was still going on.
Yeah, it's still going on. We definitely, some kids are running out of wipes, so we're gonna push to the parents to have them bring it in. But yes, we're cleaning when possible, and if not, the custodians will come in. But we're asking all our students to bring in wipes and wipe down the desks.
Well, I think it's a great thing that you're announcing that tonight. Hopefully people will hear your message about the wipes. And this one's to the superintendent. Just when you were talking about the tents, it made me wonder, just with the warm weather, like you said, has any thought been given to like after school or anything, like kids are going to congregate around outside, just to kind of, keep the kids from, all gathering right outside the school, to keep them moving, along? So
Not with the administrators on this call. They're all out there telling them to move along. So they won't be congregating around the schools. I can't control the neighborhoods down the street. But
Okay.
Mr. Kalishman, I think you have moved kids along frequently, and I see a lot of nodding heads. Mrs. Huntley, they disperse the crowds. Like I said, I can't promise they're not doing it in their own neighborhood, but they're not doing it around the schools. I think Mr. Kalishman's gone out and yelled at people on the bowl for no masks, and so hey, he's gone to Cumberland Farms, so what can I say?
All right. Thank you. Obviously, you guys have been thoughtful about it, so that was really the crux of my question. So thank you. Thank you, Amy.
Sure. Suzanne.
I thought I heard Mr. Kohut say that there was roughly 300 hybrid kids that would be returning. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
So if the capacity is at about, is that like a third of the kids? And maybe that's like almost half of the kids.
Yeah, so we're about close to
feel like
700.
Yeah,
total.
so I feel like that capacity is really low, right? And so is there a way to look at the staffing and see if there's a way to utilize some teachers that have like combining classes, or I know it's like late in the year and programming is happening and stuff, but it seems with the capacity that low, there must be a way to utilize some teachers for the remote learners.
Well, that would mean reassigning kids and teachers schedule wise.
Yeah, but I can't believe that more kids are remote than hybrid, and I mean, and that will be in school, and that the kids in school are going to get all the resources. It does.
Well, I think what drove it was, and what I'm hearing, and I think Tabitha spoke to this too, is having folks working remotely. Many kids and I've received a lot of calls over the course of the year saying, I don't see why my student needs to come in if the teacher is working remotely and my student's going to be Zooming from class. So when those folks come back, which probably April is probably the soonest realistically, I do anticipate we'll see a lot more kids now wanting to come back in late April. But for right now, yeah, you're right. The hybrid numbers are low. And I think that's what's driving it.
I get it's just so hard with the high school schedule and switching and all the different kinds of classes. It just seems like, I don't know, I guess once you figure out who's in what classes when, and if there's teachers that have any sort of free unexpected, well, I guess they wouldn't, because their kids will be in class. So if there's periods that are free, if there's a way to assign teachers just for check-ins at the very least, it just seems like you have this I guess I can't comprehend how the schedule works, but it just to Tabitha's point a little bit, it just seems like we should just make an effort for the majority of kids that aren't in the building. That's obviously just a thought. And I just was
Suzanne, I want to add to that one of the things that we uncovered, which I'm sure Mr. Kohut has heard as well through our survey, was that there were also a number of kids in the high school who weren't there because, you know, they don't live close enough to the school or have rides that they could be coming and going. So theoretically, once this schedule is in, that gets rid of that problem as well.
Yeah, no, I'm sure. Yeah.
Oh, so will we know a different number or a newer updated number of who will truly be hybrid and remote after this, selection survey goes out? Is that going out for the high school this week as well? Is it going to everybody?
Going to everybody, yes.
Okay.
So my second question was, do we have an indication how many of our METCO kids are prepared to return?
I'll throw that to Mrs. Raymond, who just attended a METCO PCO meeting.
Well, I think we're working with the families to, through multiple layers of issues. One is the bus, and how do we get them to feel comfortable with the transportation piece. So we spent, Amanda was with me as well, Mrs. Mulcahy was with me as well. And I think we made some progress. I think one of the things they want to know is what is the difference between what remote will look like after we go full in person. And I think that's kind of what I explained. We're working on that right now. What is that going to look like? I think Mrs. Mulcahy did an excellent job talking about the layers of mitigation. And the good thing is, we have evidence now based upon true data. We have no documented in-school transmission, none, right? We've been in session since September with kids in person, and we have zero. And so those cases didn't originate here. They originated in the community, right? And they came into the building. So we are the safe zone. We're the zone where if it comes in, we have been able through our mitigation strategies not to get that transmission. Where the transmission happens is in people's houses, right? When people get together or in less structured settings. So that's great news. I think that's also the data that the Department of Ed has. That is also the reason why they're having us move forward. It was really helpful. Mrs. Mulcahy was there to talk to the families to tell them that, that's why we're all comfortable, and I'm comfortable. I'm a parent too, and I work here, that my kids are in, because I see the data and we have that. It's been very transparent, which is so helpful. So hopefully, I hope that reassures people that we've done, that the district and the students have all done a really great job.
And my last question is, are we going to have to provide any more buses because of the spacing issues on buses to try to get the kids that ride to school?
Transportation guidance has changed and no physical distancing is required as of March 22nd.
Oh.
Mm-hmm.
As long as windows are open.
Yes. The Department of Education changed those regulations.
Oh, well, that answers that.
Yeah,
Well,
good question. I should have touched upon that.
Tabitha?
Hi, so just to touch upon mental health, I agree. Mental health is extremely important, and obviously, especially with high school students, there are large and vast mental health issues right now. And that was true before Corona, and Corona has exacerbated that problem. And I'm not saying going to school in person wouldn't help. There are definitely students that would be benefited from that, but there are also students who could see all of a sudden changing from a couple of classes online to then back from 8:10 to 2:30, 5 days a week, no more half day, completely in person. That's a huge shock when we've been acclimated to going online basically most of the time. And so if we're talking about mental health, the stress of that change is also going to be affecting students. And as we talked about before, the biggest issue I personally have with this is starting at 8:10, because that is it really takes away from the sleep of the students. And that is a critical part of our health physically and mentally if we're moving back in person because of mental health worries.
I think, Tabitha, I don't disagree with you. I think at some point, though, we have to balance all of these needs. And I think that there's still opportunity for discussion and an opportunity for change. But it's, one of the difficulties has been throughout the year that there have been so many different flavors of this education that has left primarily the educators and our administrators just completely tapped out and not able to offer the best of anything. So, it's hard. And, as a parent of a teenager, I get it. Getting up at that time is not easy. But, I think there's nothing that has been easy. And in fact, we talked, I think 2 meetings ago about the fact that it's, being back in school is going to require a stamina that almost nobody's used to. But we just have to get back into it. So, Mr. Giantis.
Just kind of a follow-up on this discussion. So once the kids are back 5 days a week, is there going to be any availability for counselors or adjustment counselors, anything along those lines? If someone actually did have some stress points and they needed someone to reach out to, will those folks be available?
Yes, they're always available. They've been available throughout this, but they will be available in person too. And I think one of the greatest strengths of our educators is their ability to really identify students who would need assistance and connect with those students, connect with their families. So yes, that is a great question. We'll be watching the kids carefully. And I imagine it will be the same students that we're watching now, but more. And in person is a little bit easier, I would say, and you can not agree or disagree. It's a lot easier to identify somebody that might be struggling when they're in person, while still keeping our focus on our remote kids as well. But yes.
I just want to say to members of the audience who have their hand raised that I am going to have public comment at the end. So we'll take those then.
Thank you. So next we'll move on to the 21-22 program of studies. And I believe I missed the school committee meeting where you did the first read on this.
Yes, that was 2 meetings ago, I believe.
Yes. So I'm not going to go through it. I imagine the committee has read it and we're looking for a vote to adopt.
So I will, I'll entertain a motion and then we can have a discussion and then we'll take the vote. So I will entertain a motion to approve the, sorry, I'm trying to read that, the program of studies for the 2021 to 2022 school year.
I'll
Will
make
someone make the motion.
I'll make the motion, Amy.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So any discussion and opportunities to ask Mr. Kohut, and I see also that Ms. Finn is here with us as well. So does anybody have any questions? You guys did a pretty good presentation of it, of the changes 2 weeks ago or 4 weeks ago. Anybody?
I mean, maybe we should just, for the public's view, just reiterate that the skippy beginning of the year, there was not really any way to get around.
We're not on the calendar on the program of studies.
Oh, we're on the program, sorry. Jumping. No, nothing on the program of studies.
I thought you were going to ask Mr. Kohut to go through his whole presentation again, which I don't think he's prepared for.
We'd never do that.
No. Okay, well then seeing no questions going, then I'm going to take a roll call vote. vote to approve the program of studies for the year of 21-22. Suzanne,
Yes.
Karen,
Yep, yes.
John,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. It is approved unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Kohut and team. Very excited to see those new changes in particular.
Moving on to the calendar, and this is Marshall's comment. There is an awful beginning to the school year, as we discussed at the last meeting, but there are contractual obligations to for the teachers that bind us to these start days and to certain professional development days. So the really difficult part of this calendar is that we have Labor Day, Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur all in the beginning of September. And so it is a very disjuncted start, not to mention how late it takes us in the year, that if we are to have snow days, which, you know, it's debatable whether or not we can call remote days even going into next year, we could be getting out as late as the 27th of June. So it is not the greatest schedule. And I hate the expression, it is what it is.
But it is. I will entertain a motion to approve the 2021-2022 school year calendar. Motion, anybody?
I'll begrudgingly.
I'll make the motion.
Karen's making the motion, and I'll take a second from Suzanne.
It's just killing me that it just, yeah.
Okay,
I
so
know.
any discussion? Now's your chance to speak, Ms. Wright.
Well, I just wanted to ask, if we enact any of the changes that are happening with the middle and high school calendar, I mean school day schedule and any changes we might make to start times or anything like that, is that going to impact this at all? Like for half days or for any?
We're more looking at scheduling. And then, you know, there's a conversation which has occurred in some communities of high schools that start at 7 or 7:30. We didn't investigate it at the time because we were right between we were at 8:10 between the recommended 8 and 8:30. So we didn't get involved in that discussion, but that doesn't impact a daily schedule or calendar.
I was just wondering if we are changing anything, so it's gonna mess up half days, like especially, yeah, I just wanted to make sure.
No. I don't anticipate that happening.
Any questions? Any other thoughts? All right, then a roll call vote to approve the calendar. Suzanne?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so unanimously approved.
Thank you. At the last meeting, I shared with the committee the North Shore Education Consortium's annual report. And in this meeting, I'm sharing with you our annual report that we are required to submit to Town Hall, and they publish. It is multiple pages, so I won't go through it all, but it is in our format, and I've said before, but I'll say again, I really like the North Shore Education Consortium's format, but this is a format that's required by Town Hall because it gets consolidated. It does talk about the new hires. It talks about the resignations. It talks about the retirements in some places here, and reassignments and changes in detail, what's happened during the school year for Clark, for all of the individual schools. Each school has a portion of this, and they talk about their community service and their cultural arts. So Clark, Hadley, Stanley, middle school and high school are in this, and it is a published document that gets forward to, as I said, Town Hall and put in with the other departments. So this is the annual report for the 19-20 school year, and it gets shared annually with the committee.
Is this something that's available on our website? I should probably know the answer to that in case other people are interested in looking at it.
I don't think it is, but we can certainly add it. It would be, it's pages and pages, and it might be nice for the public to be able to view. So
Maybe on your page.
sure, we can make that happen. And there's no vote required. It's just an informational piece for all of you. And also it gets consolidated or wrapped into the other departments within Town Hall.
Anybody have any questions on the annual report? Okay.
That concludes my report tonight.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent. Subcommittee, so we have policies here. Suzanne and John. I know that originally we were going to discuss international exchange students. I don't know if it makes sense to still do that tonight, considering that we don't have any formal request on the table, but do you still want to take a look at the policy?
Well, I think we don't currently have a policy. So if we're really thinking about accepting someone, we should think about the policy, and it would be great to do a first read.
Okay.
Right, so that we can vote on it prior to accepting anyone.
All right. So which one should we look at first? The EBC-S?
Well, the EBC-S one is just the COVID. No, it's fine. Just look at this one. It's fine. So we changed it. We changed our distancing requirement to 3 to 6 weeks last time. So we just need to change that in this policy. And then also Mrs. Karen noticed that it says 170 days. And what happened this year is it says 170 days because the commissioner was allowing professional development days, but we only use 19 instead of, we use 19 of them. So it should say 171 days instead of 170. And then finally, the inoculation of students. That first paragraph is our general inoculation of students policy. That second paragraph that starts with the word "to," not the word "health." I'm not sure why it's formatted like that, but from the word "to" to the end, we added that based on what Governor Baker said about requiring the flu vaccine this year.
And then he rescinded it.
He rescinded
Right.
that. So we can just amend this policy or just change this policy back to the regular policy. And these were all things we said we were going to do. We put all these policies in this supplemental policies so that we could add and subtract as needed through the pandemic. So it's just sort of like routine business to put the 3 to 6 feet in and change the 170 to 171 and take out the influenza vaccination. Yeah, if you keep going, I think 3 through 6 is down here. Right here. It used to say 6 feet, now it says 3 to 6.
Now, because these have all been read and approved prior, do we still have to go through a first read and then a vote, or can we vote?
That's a good question.
Well, Mrs. Karen has vote requested.
Okay, so I'm gonna call a vote. And if there is procedurally a problem with it, then we may have to vote again. But I will entertain a motion to.
Sorry, before you say that, if there's a problem, it'll be the amendment things, the 170 days and the influenza, and taking out that part. But the 3 to 6 feet, we talked about that last meeting. We said that we would be changing the policy, just that word. I think we were clear that we needed to do that in the policy and that we would vote on it this week. So,
Okay, so then I'm going to entertain a motion to approve all three. And it is the first being the change of distancing from 6 feet to 3 to 6 feet. amending the calendar from 170 days to 171 days, and deleting the paragraph about the influenza vaccine requirement.
Yeah, I'll
Can
make the motion.
All right, do I have a second?
I'll second.
Roll call vote. John?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that is approved. And I will just double check with the higher powers and make sure that I didn't, that we don't have to vote on that again at our next meeting.
And then so this one, since we started to have that discussion, and we need to talk about whether or not we're even going to have international students in the school. I mean, I think we should have that discussion.
Yeah.
Because I know this comes up all the time, and we sort of have reasons why we haven't done it, but I don't understand why we haven't done it. I think it's a good thing.
So as the superintendent and I have talked about, and superintendent and Mr. Kohut, if you are still here.
I don't see him.
No, I don't see him either. Oh, but I do see Miss Finn. So, you know, as we've talked about it, there is a tentative possibility of like piloting a program through AFS. And what I said to the superintendent was that I was speaking for the committee without having polled you or taken any votes, that I think from our perspective, it was a no-brainer. You know, let's extend this and let's open up some possibility for some foreign students to come here, because you know, our kids will get just as much out of it, hopefully, as they will, or almost as much. But that it's another way to impact our diversity here in Swampscott. I think from the school committee perspective, it seems like a very easy thing, you know, sign them up, bring them in. But I also want to be mindful of the people who actually have to do the work, which are our teachers and our administrators. Mr. Kohut and I spoke, and he was on board for trying this out. So this potential program that we're looking at, they would do all of the vetting for the visas. There is no additional cost to Swampscott. In the unlikely event that there might be, perhaps if the student was blind or in a wheelchair, that would be something that this company AFS takes care of. However, the woman who I spoke to said that is, I think she thought of one example in all of her years of doing this. And she said, importantly, you know, I told her about some of our hesitations, particularly as it relates to, you know, footing the bill for special needs. She said that the school has the ultimate sign off, and that after they receive the application can make their decision. So because these are children who are coming from other countries, that, you know, they don't have the same rights and protections as American, you know, students in the United States. So
can I ask a question?
Sure.
In reading through these possible student regulations, where did these come from, I guess?
So I went to the MASC website and looked at policies that other districts are using. And if you go back, this isn't part of the policy.
Yes, no, I see that.
Right. So the policy, so this incorporates a lot of things that were in other people's policies that it isn't the strictest policy, nor is it the most lenient policy. It's sort of in a go-between. And so it starts off defining the students that are allowed. And generally what I can tell is there's 3 different types of foreign students that generally come. There's J1 students, F1 students, and just cultural exchange students. So J1s are free students. Those are the ones that come in approved programs like AFS or some of the other ones. And then F1 students are ones that just like come over with their family for a year or just traveling and just living with relatives, right? And aren't in official programs. And those kids generally pay tuition, but they also don't have like kind of the backing of a program. So they're not really vetted in the same way that a J1 would be vetted. And then we have cultural exchange students, and we already have those in the high school. Like I remember we had kids from China here once, like for the day, or
I think we had some French students a few years ago.
Yeah, like I hosted some Spanish kids when my kids were in high school, you know, that came to school for a few days. So we already have those students. So I took the liberty of just writing up something for the tuition students, because the ones that are not tuition, you know, like to try this program with students that don't go through an organization, I think would be a lot tougher, you know, us not knowing all the laws and regulations and paperwork they need. Plus when they come through these organizations, they get, you know, English language tests, and they have all sorts of recommendations, and the organization kind of sponsors them. So I think they're sort of like a safer group of students to start this with, at least.
I think not only do they sponsor them, but they have the resources to help should anything go south, or should.
And they have all sorts of agreements with host families about their responsibilities.
Yeah.
So it just made sense to think about that group of students first. So Pam, that's where I started there, right? And then I looked to see what other districts required, and other districts had protocols or regulations in place that like that paragraph, the second paragraph you can see on this page right now, it says the school department shall develop appropriate procedures that govern the admissions and tenure or whatever. So it's like the district sort of saying the minimum requirements for these students, or what, you know, sort of like what our internal guidelines are, maybe, right? Like these are the kind of kids we'll accept, and these are the kids we won't accept, or something. I think like I was just making an attempt at writing something. I was pulling some of these things from other policies and just putting them in one place, so that when you create this internal document, you can consider these things that other districts have used. So that was just to sort of to frame that, but then go back to the policy. Like, I liked that instead of using one company, Amy, like you're saying, we're going to pilot this with AFS. I mean, we can pilot this with any approved program from the U.S. Department of State, right? And that website, you go to it, and you go to that website, they have all these approved programs, and you can read about them, and whatever. So, I mean, if ultimately we can say yes or no to anything, that's all that really matters. But I think like this service, the U.S. Department of State, you know, has all these standards, whatever. So to use any organization that comes from this list, and then it just talks about, you know, the host family in Swampscott provides all the lodging and support and resumes all the matters of care and related, just like any student moving into the district, right? You just enroll your kid, right? But this is just saying, you know, they're a bona fide resident and they proved that and whatever. And then also it was important that the kid had health records and all the immunizations that we require. I mean, we say they have to abide by, they say we have to, I mean, it says we have to abide by school committee policies anyway. This is kind of a little redundant, telling them they need immunizations, but whatever. And then it says, you know, tuition, they pay they're tuition free, but they're expected to pay all the expenses, like, you know, to go to prom or to play a sport, whatever it is. And most districts say no waivers. So there's no there's no free and reduced lunch waivers or anything for these kids, right? They're just expected to pay. And then all the other little things were on the other pages, like sort of for the district to decide, you know, how you do graduation or anything else. But anyway, this is just like this is a compilation of a whole bunch of different policies. And yeah.
I see Martha Raymond and Martha Seibert with your hands raised.
I was just gonna say, I'm not positive, but I'm fairly sure that once they're established as a resident, if they needed any type of support or were referred, they would be eligible for those services.
No, they don't get established as a resident. They don't ever get established as a resident. That host family is hosting them.
I still think that if they are here, that they will
Martha,
have access.
Martha, I don't know about other programs, but AFS has assured me that they are, that this is not, that we don't. And
I will check, you know what, I will check for you.
And to boot, the administration has the last right of approval after seeing the application.
I
No, I understand that, but things develop, especially in high school, after people get here. And so I let me check. I will check on that because I've had similar issues, a little sort of similar, and those students had access to all that they could avail themselves of the rights of a public education, which include free and appropriate public education. It did not matter where they came from, who they were with, who they were living with, nothing. We could not consider any of that. They had the right.
Well, I know that the superintendent had expressed her concern about that, which is why we looked into it. And it was my understanding that based on their visa, that could not happen. That they were not entitled to the same. So, but I will, Martha, we can talk offline, and I can.
Yeah, I'll check with our special education attorney for you.
Okay. Yes. Okay, and I'll share the information that I have with you.
Yeah. No, I can share it.
Okay, Ms. Seibert.
I have similar concerns that Mrs. Raymond just expressed, and I know when I was in Lexington, they expressly prohibited these type of visas, whether it was an H1 or J1, because what ended up happening in that community was families were sending their children to live with complete strangers, and they show up with the visa that the school district will accept now, and they're able to enroll. So while I think you have good intentions of using just AFS, I don't know if you write a policy saying that you can enroll with that type of visa, I don't know that we can say no to someone who shows up with that visa now.
Well, let's find out.
Yeah, I don't understand what you're saying. Like if someone who has a J1 visa.
People know the services that we have in the United States, and they are not comparable to other countries, especially actually in the area of special education. And so that does not surprise me that people would do that, because you want to access our excellent services that we have, and because we have a federal law that mandates our services, and that's not the same across the entire world.
Right. So any policy we have, I mean, it needs to say kind of what this one says, on a case by case, space available basis, that we get to review everything, that they have to be part of one of these, programs. It's not just I have a visa, I come here.
I mean,
that can't be what, right.
So those programs, they have rules. Like, I mean, the visa doesn't allow you to stay here beyond a full year anyway, just like it. I mean, I guess you're right. We have to just look at each program to make sure they have safeguards for lots of those things if we can't have them ourselves. Yeah.
Right, and the policy doesn't say that we have to take someone. It just says that we can if we decide on that individual application that we want to. Do you know what I mean? Like, it should be worded in such a way that it's not a free-for-all.
So to my point, I think from a school committee perspective, this just seems like a really nice idea, but where the rubber hits the road, it could be more complicated. Right. So why don't we, so Martha, you check. And I would also like to put you in touch with the woman that I was talking to walk through the concerns. Okay.
I think we should determine too, if there's something else we could write into a policy that protects us in any way,
Mhm.
or just ensures that this happens successfully for everyone.
Okay. All right, any other questions or discussion around that? Okay, I'm going to move on to the consent agenda, which is designed to expedite the handling of routine and miscellaneous business in the district. The school committee can adopt the entire consent agenda with one motion. At the request of any committee member, any items can be removed from the consent agenda and placed on the regular agenda for discussion. Tonight, we have three things. We have a regular session minute from February 24th, an executive session minute from February 3rd, and warrant number 2135. Can I get a motion to approve?
Make the motion.
Can I have a second?
I'll second.
And then roll call vote. Call Karen first.
Yes.
Suzanne,
Yes.
John,
Yes.
and I am a yes. So motion is approved. And it is 8:52. So I see some hands raised and I'm going to take some public comments. I will spend 20 minutes on public comment. I'm going to ask each person, if you could, to limit yourself to 3 minutes so that we can fit people in. I also want to remind everybody that it's comment and it's not an open session with back and forth. So there is a strong possibility that if you are answering a question, we won't be able to answer it tonight, but we'll follow up with you afterwards. And then I also want to remind everyone that tomorrow night at 6:30, I think it is an input session that our Director of Teaching and Learning is running, Dr. Bacon, where it will be perfect to add into official record about the reopening program. So with that, I am going to recognize Emily Silly, and you can take yourself off mute, and you've got 3 minutes.
Hi, can you hear me?
I can, thank you.
So I just wanted to first give a shout out to Amanda because she's worked really, really hard on this Binax Now program, and it's not an easy thing to implement into a district. And you know, her work has just, I mean, it's obvious. And we did train all of our nurses today, and everybody's ready and up and ready to go. I also just wanted to reiterate what she said and just say, you know what, this is not a test that is you get a negative test and your kid goes back to class type of thing. This is if you have symptoms in school, you're going to be out regardless. So this is a way for us to identify positive cases and be able to rectify that problem really fast, get that student or that staff member out of school really fast so that we can have the fewest amount of close contacts as possible. So this is not I'm going to send my kid to school and have them tested there and they're going to get negative and go back to class type of thing. I just really want to make that point so that people understand that this is a way to identify positive cases, and that's all that it is. If your kid has symptoms in class, or if you are a staff member in the school and you have symptoms and you come and we test you, you're going home. And I just want to make sure that people understand that. And it's just really important that you know that. I don't want people to get a wrong impression from what the goal of this test really is. And that's all I wanted to say. And I just wanted to have people recognize Amanda because she's worked really hard on this.
Emily, thank you. And I want to recognize that for people who are not aware, that Emily Silly is our lead nurse.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to I hope I'm not going to ruin your name. I have Caroline Malhot. You can unmute yourself.
Hi, I don't know if you can actually see me. I'm assuming you can just hear me.
You can only hear you, but
Yep.
you hear you well.
That's good because I've had the whole phone at an angle for a while. One of the biggest things about my son is at the high school, and I haven't seen anything about how the school intends to police, enforce if kids violate the mask policy or the social distancing policy. I think my concern is that with the return to restaurants opening up more venues opening up publicly, and all the older people being vaccinated, but kids aren't, especially that, there's nothing for kids under 16. And I guess my concern is that, we're now moving it down to 3 feet distance. I think we are unfortunately, I think there's going to be another surge, but that's just my personal opinion come April, which may change all this given what, is going around the country at this point. Be that as it may, but I guess I wanted to know if the teachers have discussed and talked about how they're going to be able to monitor kids in the hallways. Now you're going to have a lot more kids in the school, so it's going to be a lot harder to monitor. You're going to need more people out in the hallways. How is that going to be enforced? I don't know if that's a question that has been addressed yet.
I can, without going into too much detail, I can say that it has not been addressed yet. I think it would be fair, correct me if I'm wrong, to my administrators to say that it will be addressed, and it'll come out, and it's part, I believe, of one of the reasons why we're asking for volunteers.
Okay. To come to the school and actually
perhaps.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I might be speaking out of turn there.
Well,
but
actually,
okay.
a public comment, you've directed us not to get into a conversation. But I will answer this because it has already occurred, even in the limited hybrid models that have occurred. We have had challenges to the mask policy and students are sent home. There, 1 reminder in the classroom, 2 reminders sent to the office, sent home. There is a strict adherence to the mask wearing policy, to the social distancing. I know that students need reminders on the social distancing, but the mask wearing, we've been very fastidious about and very, I guess you would say punitive in making students go home. There is not an option. Mr. Kalishman, I don't know if you want to chime in.
Yeah, I was just going to add that, at the very beginning, I would say it was an issue. We had to send a few kids home at the beginning. And since then, the masks have been on in school. So I don't know if it, I think it took everybody some getting used to because it was all new territory. But after the first few weeks of school, it hasn't been an issue. So, but we'll definitely, make that clear to families and to students as they enter back into the building as well.
We take it very seriously. It's not optional. You walk in the building, you better have a mask. Actually, it's school committee policy. We get out of our cars in the parking lot and we all have masks on. If you're on school grounds, you need to have a mask on. Okay. And there is no negotiating that. So that's a good question.
We have signage.
Thank you very much. Thank you. That was good to hear. Thank you.
I have Ms. Kawanda Boyd next. If you unmute yourself, you can speak. Ms. Boyd, I think you and I spoke about 2 months ago or 3 months ago.
Yes, we did. Hello, everyone.
How are you?
I'm doing okay, thankfully. So I just wanted to speak on behalf of the Mecco families. We have, our top 3 concerns. A lot of our children are remote. We want to know and we might have missed this because we were in we have a second of the Wednesday of the month, our regularly scheduled PCO meeting. But what I wanted to know was, what will remote instruction look like? Live instruction, I should say, for remote learners. What will that look like for us? Or for anybody remote, I should say. We need to know what that is so that we can make that decision about whether or not we want to remain remote. I talked to Martha about it, and I know and I trust that you're on it, but I wanted to share that. The second thing that we're concerned about is the bus. Understand that the mandate is restrictions have been lifted. Want to know what Swampscott will do in addition to those restrictions being lifted, meaning we at minimum want our kids to be able to sit independently, one student to a seat. It's super uncomfortable to think that our kids will be on the bus for 4 hours a day, sitting next to another kid with or without mask. Like, I understand masks will be on, but directly next to someone without any feet in between you for 4 hours is a long time. So that's something that we'd like to know so that we can make an informed decision. The third thing that I want to have you guys understand, and Martha, I think we talked about this once you left the call, was some people have before and after school. Our kids' days are very long. You all know that. We signed up for it. We're okay with it. But a lot of people have before and after school programs that their children are in. If we feel our backs are against the wall, which a lot of us feel that way, for our children just to obtain a decent education for the remainder of the year, if our backs are against the wall and we need to send our children in, we may lose that slot for our children, that after and before school program care, because that's changed a bit. Like before COVID, we would send our kids to a Boys and Girls Club in the morning and or afternoon. Right now, the Boys and Girls Club programs are taking our kids during the day as a pod. And if we say, okay, I'm pulling my kid out so I can of this pod so I can send them in school, we also lose the before and after school care, which is something that folks are considering. But in some crazy event where we wind up back in a situation where we need to send our kids back home, we are now left with no care for our children throughout the entire day. So those are three things that we want to really understand so that we can make informed decisions before we need to understand those things before the informed decision is or before the decision is needed, if that makes sense.
It does. I marked down your three concerns, and I know I see Ms. Raymond nodding, and I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of conversations going on behind the scenes.
Great. Thank you all.
Right. Thank you. I am going to recognize who I believe is Colin Codner. You can talk. It looks like in order for you to speak, Mr. Codner, you have to update your Zoom. It says you're using an older version of Zoom. So if you want to do that, then I will recognize you after. If you go to zoom.us at the top left, it will allow you to update it. So I'm going to go forward to Scott Coughlin, and you can unmute yourself.
All right. Hi. Thank you. I have two questions. One is, at some point you were saying that families who choose to remain remote may do so, but time on learning is not a factor for this group of students. And I don't know what that means. And the second question or thought I have is that I'd like to get some more kind of flavor of what concentrating on the students in front of you means for the students who are remote. It does sound, a lesser attention is going to be paid to remote, and to me that I don't quite get that, because they're not anything less now that some are hybrid, and I know the numbers change from people being in there, but a student is a student whether they're remote or not, and I really hope that will be the case going forward.
Would it be fair, Ms. Bacon, Dr. Bacon, to encourage Mr. Coughlin and people with similar concerns to participate in tomorrow's meeting? Will that address any of that, or what's your recommendation?
Yes, at tomorrow evening's meetings, we'll be sharing more details about exactly what the day of a remote student who chooses to remain remote after we go back to in-person learning, what their day will look like. So we'll be sharing more details tomorrow. Those same details will be shared in the survey itself, so that when people receive the survey on the weekend, they'll be able to read through those, consider it as a family, and then make a choice about what the best plan is for their student moving forward.
Right. Is that
That was one, and the other one was whatever, but time on learning is not a factor for this group of students. Will that be covered tomorrow as well, or is that something you can cover now?
I think that'll be something that's covered tomorrow as the details are shared with more clarity.
So tomorrow night then?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. I have Mr. Codner again. Mr. Codner, it says that you are showing up as a panelist. There you are. Why don't you go ahead and unmute yourself?
Sorry for the sweatshirt. Thank you. Again, I want to start by really thanking this committee, the volunteers, the administrators, the educators, and the students for all their work that they really put in to putting this plan in place. I did want to ask for some additional information regarding the rationale behind keeping the students who had previously elected to remain remote through April out of the school for, depending on the grade, 2 to 4 weeks. And then secondly, if you could make some kind of a comment in regards to your interpretation for the commissioner's mandate that these students return to class, and whether or not this mandate from the commissioner would override any previous parent district agreement to keep the kids remote for the remainder of through the spring break time. Thank you.
I just want to make sure that I have this. The second one was asking on whether or not the mandate from the commissioner would override any previous agreements.
Yes, the agreement that the parents made to remain remote through April vacation, which is the plan as it currently stands.
Okay, and could you just restate again the first part? I'm sorry.
Yeah, just understanding the rationale as to why the students are going to be held to that previous agreement. Is there some underlying influx rationale? I just don't understand the rationale behind it, and I would just love to understand why that decision was made.
Right. So I'm going to, I've just written down both of these, and I'm going to table that for this evening. And see if that doesn't come out a little bit more in some of the communications that's coming from Dr. Bacon. And if it's not, then we'll make sure to communicate that.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. I have Ms. Becca Bucklin, who is the head of the Teachers Union.
Hi, thank you. Great presentation. I want to first say thank you to Tabitha for speaking so eloquently on behalf of our students, and in particular remote students. I also want to thank all the educators. We do a lot of thanking, and I think we need to recognize our educators and all the work that they've put in this year. I do want to stress that I think we have been talking about remote learners, and I think It is not a luxury. It is a must. The communities around us, Linfield, Marblehead, they're all hiring remote teachers to make sure that our remote learners are being successful. And I think that that's something that we need to really put a focus on this year. And we are so happy as educators to get back together. Amy and I, we've been talking about different ways to get vaccinations, and we can't thank the parents enough for trying to help us get those vaccinations completed. We're really happy to be getting back to some type of normalcy. And we know that there are many logistics that we need to work out, and we look forward to working together with the administration to make it as successful for everyone so that we can do that. So I just wanted to recognize all those different things that we're talking about. And I'm really looking forward to school committee meeting in person. I think it would be a real boost in morale. I'm assuming that you guys will be doing that really soon as well. I just think that's a great way for us all to be kind of on the same wavelength. And I just think it would go really far in the community. People have asked why school committee isn't meeting in person. So I know you guys are probably all on that same page wanting to do that as well. So I really want to thank you, Pam, for that presentation. And I look forward to us really working together to make the rest of this year as successful as possible. I tell my kiddos every day that the best part of my day is seeing their faces, whether it's in person in front of me or at the end of the day on Zoom. So I know that we have a lot to work out, but I know it will be successful, and I'm looking forward to that.
Ms. Buckland, I do want to say, as it relates to meeting in person, it's something that we have all really wanted to do, particularly for the benefit of our newest member who we haven't actually even met yet. And that doesn't feel very good in terms of working as a team. One of the things that prevents us from meeting in person is the open meeting law. And we've made the decision, at least temporarily, that this allows us to engage with more people, particularly at a time when, if we did meet in person, there would not be a public, an in-person audience. So that's holding us back, not our desire to not meet in person.
Oh, people can't Zoom in. I was just curious.
Well, they could, but it just, they could not be in the building in the way that we used to until all has been lifted.
But they could see you in person and we could be on Zoom. I'm just curious. I just wanted to be clear. I wanted to clarify.
Yeah, but it's going to be a lot of work for Joe and his team to try to make that work. And we didn't want to put more on his plate.
That's true. I did forget about that. But Ms. Buckland, we will absolutely see what we can do without putting any tax on Mr. Dulett and Ms.
No, I don't want anything on Joe.
Yeah. Oops, sorry. Sorry, I muted you by accident. Sorry, if you unmute, I didn't know if you were over or not yet.
I said we love Joe.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. I have Leanne. If you could just identify yourself, since I only have your first name.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. So my name is Leanne Miller, and I have 2 students at the middle school. And I saw the school schedule for next year. And you said that it looks like the last day of school will be June 27th. And for the students that also get summer services, they generally start right after 4th of July. If there's any snow days, that doesn't give those students even a week off from school. And mental health wise, I really think those students more than anybody need a break after a school year before they start their summer services. So I know you already put it into motion that you're accepting that schedule, but I would really seriously ask you to reevaluate the beginning of the school year to allow for snow days, so that these students do have at least a week off at the end of school next year.
I can answer a little bit about this. We do have contractual obligations with our staff to begin before Memorial Day weekend, Labor Day weekend, which we do. But because of the way that some of the holidays fall this year, particularly Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah, there's a funny break right at the beginning that we are committed to leaving in place, despite the fact that it can be problematic. I'd say every 4 or 5 years or so, we do run into this and wind up with these dates that run late, and we just have to pray for no snow and potentially take advantage of some of the online learning that we made happen this year.
I was just going to say that generally the first 3 days of school are before Labor Day, and those 3 days generally end up being the kids getting set into their school, their lockers and their notebooks, and just acclimating to the new schedule and their new teachers and everything. And it doesn't, again, the screen was a little blurry, but it didn't look like those 3 days were going to happen before Labor Day this year, next year. Is that true?
I believe that they are. I don't have that right in front of me, though.
Oh, okay. That's what I was looking at. Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. I see Ms. Zoll, and then after Ms. Zoll, I'm going to take one more person.
Hi, thank you. Can y'all hear me?
Sure. If I can just remind you to keep it to 3 minutes, please.
You got it. I got a timer on in the background.
Good, thank you.
I just want to share a very personal, I'm going to try real hard not to get emotional. A personal thank you. It's been a year and a day since my second grader was back in his building, full 5 days a week. And I know how monumental and Herculean this task has been to get the kids back in the building. It just means, I know it means so much to so many families, but speaking very personally, it means so much to us. I know there's still a lot more work that has to happen. I applaud Tabitha for advocating for her fellow students, especially those remotely. I know there's still so much more work to do, but just knowing that there is some semblance of normalcy coming back is just, it has instilled a level of hope, truthfully, that I have not really had for this entire pandemic experience. And I'm just really grateful. The other thing that I wanted to share tonight too is I really applaud the parents and families in this community who have rallied around the volunteer efforts, especially relative to teacher vaccinations. And then I also applaud the district for getting creative around leveraging parent volunteers to help with some of these staffing issues. I think something that I just kind of want to get out there on record. I think it is an absolute shame that we had to go to those levels because the state failed to provide the leadership and the resourcing that every school district deserves in this state. And so I'm thrilled to do my part in whatever way I can. I'm thrilled that there are as many volunteers that have already signed up. It's just absolutely baffling to me that we as a district, as a town, with the resources that we have, that we had to get to that point. So I don't want it to be, misconstrued like I'm like crapping on that. I'm not. I just can't believe that as a district, we were put in that place in the first place. So yeah, just super grateful. Looking forward to tomorrow night's presentation to get more into the weeds and the nitty gritty of it. But I'm just absolutely thrilled. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your heartfelt words. And then this is will be our last. I have Allison Oxton. you can unmute yourself.
Craig Hitchcock was before Ally.
Oh, okay. Then I will.
When you said last, Craig was before that.
Okay, so I have already unmuted Miss Oxton, and then I'll recognize you, Mr. Hitchcock.
Thank you for taking my comment. I'd like to say that I appreciate the hard work that's being done to evaluate the ventilation system in all of the school buildings. I know that it is a big undertaking, and people were excited about the work that has been done. I would just want to encourage continued work on the ventilation system, as far as air purification systems being the end all be all, and opening windows in these schools, that going forward to think about the fall and winter months of 2021, that we work on continuing the exhaust system. The other question I have is, if we are going to test students with rapid testing in the health office, despite the positive and negative tests, they're still going to be sent home. And I know that this is not open for really comment, but what is the point of testing if they are going to be sent home no matter what, knowing that the rapid testing isn't as accurate as the PCR testing? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Ms. Mulcahy if you could put together a communication about that, because I'm sure that there will be others who will have similar questions. And then last but not least, Mr. Hitchcock, this also is telling me that you have an older version of Zoom. So I can promote you to panelist, but that means we see you. I don't know if you're comfortable with that.
Sure. Hi, thank you very much for that. I'll have to update my Zoom. So I'll make it quick. The reason I wanted to speak was piggybacking on a topic someone else brought up earlier, in seeing that it looked like there was maybe a 3+ week difference between when the students who had already opted to be remote only would be sort of eligible to come back in the building, as opposed to, the folks who had already chosen to be hybrid. I had a couple thoughts, and the first is that, with respect to the high school, it seemed to me, based on the numbers we heard earlier, that I think it was somewhere around 270 people had opted to be hybrid in the building that normally has, I guess, 700 or so. And so, given that we don't even know if all the hybrid people will choose to come in full time, I too was curious about the decision why, why more people couldn't come back into the building sooner, particularly given that, when people made the decision to choose remote versus hybrid, that was made at a time where sort of the differences between what remote learning looked like and what in-person looked like were a very different set of choices than sort of what they will be now. And it seemed, I think this point is probably relevant to the middle school as well, but maybe more of the high school, just because it seems like there's more capacity. So I guess I'd encourage people to think about whether or not it's fair that everyone shouldn't, get a chance to choose now which bucket to be in, or, if there's concern about opening the floodgates and letting everyone in on March 29th, if, there couldn't be some incremental number of students who could be let in, below full capacity, but more than just what's there now. And I don't know if anyone wants to comment, or you can just take it under advisement.
I think we'll take it under advisement, because I feel like we've got the right people sitting around the table who are hearing this now, not just from one or, but from a few people, that it'll come up in their conversations, and there'll be more to come.
Thanks.
Right. Thank you. I appreciate your time. Okay. With that, I am going to, unless anybody has anything to add, I am going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So what's the lunch plan?
Was that a?
I'll make the motion.
Okay. Can I have a second?
Yeah, I'll second.
Roll call vote. All in favor. John?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Karen?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. It is 9:26 and we are adjourned. I want to say thank you to everybody who's here and who stuck it out. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Max.
Bye.